Hello and welcome into the Magic the Gathering unofficial audiobooks podcast. I am your humble and grateful narrator, Phil Dawson. And for those of you who have been following up to date episodes, I deeply apologize for the delay in an episode. As you know, if you've been listening or following along, been in the middle of starting up a beer brewery here in Japan, and we are inching ever so closer to being done with that. We have been installing all our equipment the last month, basically, and it has been pretty much nonstop. It also includes bringing in installation workers from all over the world. And well, yes, we work hard. We also play hard, which leads to not too many free nights to sit back and read a chapter. And as I say this to you now, this episode was actually supposed to come out yesterday. I was all fired up to do it, but I forgot my laptop at my office. So there you go. So the family and I went to what is called the Tanabata Festival here in Sendai and had a great time. But now I'm ready. So again, sorry for the episode delays. Also, schedule-wise, I should tell you, I'll be heading out of town through mid-next week. Not sure of my schedule entirely, but it might be another whole week and a half before we get to another one. Anyway, when I have the time, I will record. I love doing this, but sometimes it does have to take a back seat. Meanwhile, to my patrons, thank you so much for sticking through this period. I know it can be tough supporting a creator who's not producing content constantly. But everyone has stuck around so far, and I'm very grateful for all of you. So please continue to do so. We still have patron goals to hit 50 total by the end of this year. So that's a few months. We have a chance to do it. I'll be looking over our loyalty reward stuff that need to go out this month. Again, if you subscribe to the Patreon, you start earning time, which earns you rewards. And actually, I have a couple of pictures to share from some of our patrons who have sent me some things wearing the clothes, the merch, having the stickers, all that kind of stuff. I'll put that on our Patreon page and our Discord. Anyway, the Patreon is the only place to get the merch right now, and it's super easy and super helpful and super appreciated. You can follow me on Twitter or Z, whatever. My Instagram as well, Phil and Sendai. Hit me up, your thoughts on the show. I always appreciate it. And our Discord's continuing to grow. You can check it out for the latest up-to-date happenings in Magic and the lore. Okay, thank you. Let's get to it. Let's go. Three, Stronghold. A dark room.
Having defeated the Slivers, thanks to Hannah's ingenuity, Weatherlight made its way into a vast, open area framed by enormous pillars. Here the air was scalding, and bolts of electricity shot randomly through the dry, crackling air. This was the furnace of Rath. As the ship wavered and bucked on the currents of hot air, fires broke out here and there on the wooden deck. Crew members rushed with buckets of water to quench the flames, but some were seared and scorched. One, caught in the midst of a lightning bolt, burned like a torch, screaming until Korvax hurled him over the side to perish in the flames below. Aurum worked frantically to heal the crew, but when she employed white magic in her healing, the anger of the furnace seemed to focus on her. Flashes of light surrounded her, and Gerrard shouted to Hannah to get them out of that horrible place before the healer was fried to a crisp. Then the crew saw that she had wrenched a thin metal rod from the ship's rails and had placed it on the bow of the Weatherlight, where it drew the electrical bolts, sparing the crew and her from the threat of sparking death. The ship struggled up out of the furnace through another maze of passages, till at last it emerged over a dark, oily mass that swayed and bubbled.
Is that the place you called the Death Pits? Hillcaster shivered.
Yes, there Volrath's servants brought those experiments of their master that had failed to meet his exacting requirements. black ooze swayed and surged beneath the ship, and then rose in a great wave, threatening to overwhelm Weatherlight. On the crest of the wave rode skeletons who leaped aboard the ship, grappling with the crew.
Ilcaster shook his head. Out of the frying pan, into the fire, he said solemnly. It seems like every creature they meet was worse than the last.
It seemed that way to the crew, I'm sure,
agreed the librarian.
In any event, they panicked, rushing this way and that, tumbling down the hatches below decks. Squee, the goblin cabin boy, however, climbed up one of the masts.
Don't tell me, said Ilcaster. That's the end of Squee?
Don't get ahead of me,
cautioned the old man.
Squee, as I say, climbed the mast. Gerrard, seeing the little goblin in danger, went after him. The skeletons swiped at the captain, but Squee, who clutched the salvation sphere, an artifact for which he developed a peculiar attachment, accidentally activated it. Its gentle glow suffused both Squee and Gerrard, and the skeleton attacking them hesitated and turned away. Evidently, the sphere could stop the skeletons. The other creatures gave way before Gerrard as he carried Squee, who carried the sphere, and the ship moved quickly away from that dangerous place.
Ilcaster breathed a sigh of relief, settled once more at the librarian's feet. And beyond the walls came a new wave of rain and hail. It shrieked and groaned, as if the heavens themselves were being tortured. But neither the boy nor the man paid any heed to it.
With the death pits behind them, the crew brought Weatherlight to the stronghold itself. For long minutes that seemed to stretch into hours, Hannah, standing at the wheel, searched for a sheltered spot on the lowered part of the hulking menace in which to dock the ship. At last, she drew up alongside a tiny balcony. Beyond it, a dark entryway gaped in shadow. Just as the ship drew up to the balcony, a guard emerged from the door. His mouth opened to a cry of warning, and instinctively he stepped back.
What happened? The boy was open-mouthed.
Miri, the cat warrior, leapt from the ship's side and smothered the guard in a sudden flash of claws and fur. The guard was dead before he knew what had struck him.
I'd love to have seen Miri, the boy murmured. Any pictures of her?
One. Here.
The librarian opened a raggedly bound manuscript. The boy stared thoughtfully. Somehow I thought she'd look fiercer, more warlike.
Don't underestimate her. On all accounts, she was a superb fighter. Gerrard made it very clear in his notes that Miri was more than able to take care of herself.
The boy nodded. So she killed the guard. What did they do next?
Gerrard, Stark, and Krovax joined her on the balcony. Turning, Gerrard told Hannah that if anything happened, they'd rendezvous at the gardens.
Gardens? You mean this stronghold actually had gardens?
Yes, but far above the place where Weatherlight was docked. Stark gave hasty directions to Hannah on how to find them, and then the rescue party stole into the stronghold.
Ilcaster shivered. I'm glad I wasn't there. I've been too scared to go with them.
Don't be too sure of that, my boy.
The librarian looked at him.
Heroes come from the most unlikely material and the most unlikely places. No sooner had they entered the fortress than they encountered a beast. Its limbs twisted, misshapen. Krovax pursued, sword drawn, and others followed in the passage as it twisted and turned deeper and deeper into the stronghold. After what must have seemed hours to them, Gerrard, Stark, and Miri burst into an open space just in time to see Krovax standing over the fallen body of the creature. He was hacking at it, slashing its body to pieces, though it was already dead. When Gerrard remonstrated him, the noble replied, "Legacy may be your destiny, Gerrard. Selenia is mine."
Ilcaster shook his head as if trying to clear it. That's an odd thing to say. What did he mean?
You'll see. Gerrard and the others looked about the room in which they found themselves. There was a massive chamber ringed with seats around the central command table. On top of the table was a three-dimensional map that Gerrard, with his years of traveling, recognized immediately as Dominaria.
Dominaria? Really? The boy asked. But why was Volrath interested in Dominaria? Did he have some plan to... The lad's voice faded slowly as the implication of what he was about to blurt hit home. The old man looked at him soberly and continued.
Gerrard, of course, didn't know anything about it. But from the map, he realized something of what Volrath was intending. He manipulated the figures of it, including the tiny model of Predator. He saw a dark blanket spread across Spinalia in the wake of Grevin's ship. And in that moment, he wondered if he and the legacy were all that stood between Dominaria and an eternal darkness.
The librarian walked to the window and looked out at the storm, and resumed his tale.
Gerrard and the others left the map room, climbed through the maze of passages winding through the stronghold. Higher and higher they ascended until Weatherlight must have been far below them. Still, they remained undetected. Still, they searched for their companions. And then, at last, they found them.
Karn's Tale. J. Robert King. Karn stood in a dark, hot cell. His massive arms hung dejectedly at his sides. His silver bulk was statue still. Voluntary deactivation. It was his last refuge when the chaos around him or within him grew overwhelming. In such times of trouble, he would not act, but simply stand and wait. The chaos around him now was terrible. Weatherlight had been crippled by Predator, Gerrard had fallen overboard during the fighting, Karn had accidentally slain a Mog Goblin before surrendering, and Tahngarth had boarded Grevinilvek's ship to save Karn, only to become a fellow prisoner within the stronghold. He was even now shackled to the wall of an adjacent cell. The sound of his struggles stabbed beneath Karn's stout cell door. And Tahngarth would die. There would be torture, of course. Phyrexians thrived on torture. And after that, death. Flesh and blood captives did not last long among the Phyrexians. They were either executed or transformed, filled with metal studs, trussed up with spinal implants, warped into monstrosities. Phyrexians believed in the perfection of flesh through pain, turning muscle into metal. When they were finished with Tahngarth, he would be dead, or so changed he would wish he were dead. But the chaos within Karn was even worse. He knew he was responsible for his friend's plight. Guilt, shame, regret, rage, hatred. Though outwardly Karn was motionless, inwardly he boiled. Despair, desperation, bloodlust. Emotions churned chaotically through him, fighting to emerge. Every threat Tahngarth shouted at their captors, every sound of Minotaur limbs thrashing against implacable shackles fanned the firestorm in Karn. But none of it boiled forth. Despite the tempest raging in him, Karn stood, inward chaos masked by outward calm. It was his final refuge. No matter how terrible the tempest within or without, he could always stand and wait. Meanwhile, shackled in flowstone, Tahngarth still fought. That was the real difference between Karn and Tahngarth. Both were massive, powerful, physical creatures, unswervingly loyal to their masters. Ravaged by inner storms of emotion, Karn's rage ended in paralysis, and Tahngarth's in,
"I'll kill you, Grevinilvek!"
seethed the Minotaur between grasps of exertion.
"I'll break loose and hunt you down and kill—"
The threat ended in another roar of fury. Karn's massive jaw ground slowly, and his fists clenched. Guilt, shame, regret. The chaos of emotion threatened to topple him. Twice before, violent passion had unbalanced him, and death had resulted. Now, honor and moral resolution bound him, held him firm, stronger shackles than any other. And he stood. It was his last refuge, to stand. He had been standing that way the night it all began, the night he had slain an innocent. It had been dark then, too, but it was a verdant darkness, a darkness filled with the sibilance of insects and growing things. Karn did not breathe, but he wished he could. He wished to feel the vibrant heat of the foothills sliding into him, the warm balm of life. Instead, he stood, still and listening, among fat green stalks of bamboo that grew near the waterhole. A gentle breeze stirred fronds and leaves, vines buzzed with rows of cicadas. Beyond the lush greenery of the oasis, a desert brooded, arid, implacable, and deadly. But here was water and life. Overhead, Sidar condos, our boreal village, glowed, bamboo windowsills warmed with oil lamps. Here and there, human voices sung lullabies or spoke quiet assurances to fretful children. Hushed laughter circled him in cycles of stories and platters of foot. Bare feet padded quietly along bamboo walkways. Guards peered out into the lush night that surrounded Karn, watchful and contented. Karn was a village guardian, too, though unlike the others, he remained on the oasis floor, and remained discontented. While sounds and smells of life breezed over and around him, a gale of emotions moved through him. Strange, wild, ever-changing, this storm of passion was as troubling as it was wonderful. One moment, his spirit would exult in the majestic symphony of tree frogs and songbirds all around, and the next he would tremble with the thought that a snake might somehow slither past him and climb the bamboo stalks to the loft above where Gerrard slept. Karn thought then of the boy, 16 years old, brown-haired, keen-eyed. His skin was as light and fragile as porcelain, unable to bear very long the direct sunlight that had so handsomely burnished the other villagers. The orphan Gerrard was out of place in other ways, too. A year younger than his stepbrother Vul, but too young to navigate the lofted courts of his stepfather, cut off from Sidar Kondo's succession, instrumental in Vul's estrangement from the Sidar, heir to a much-coveted magical treasure that Vul had even now pillaged, Gerrard was caught squarely between the peaceful grandeur of his stepfather's lands and the violent revolution his stepbrother was fomenting. The effect of Vul's betrayal of this tribe had been to make Gerrard seem younger than he was, as if he sought to bury the memory of his once blood brother by reverting to the simpler days of childhood. Karn told himself that this stage couldn't last, but it had already lasted longer than he expected. At every turn, danger awaited the boy, and that fact stirred a storm of worry in Karn. He felt a sudden stab of guilt that he was too heavy to ascend to the bamboo platform where Gerrard slept, beneath the green canopy of the frond roof and the spangled black vault of night. Guilt gave place next to pride, for Gerrard was among the smartest and strongest boys his age in the village, treated by the Sidar as his own son. Next came regret, as Karn thought again of the Sidar's true son, Vul, embittered, rebellious, declared foe of Kondo and Gerrard alike. Then anger about the stolen pieces of Gerrard's legacy. Into the midst of these emotions came sorrow. It took some moment before Karn recognized the source of this feeling, a soft sobbing sound from the sleeping platform above. Craning backward, Karn looked up at the magically suspended loft and called out quietly, his voice rumbling in the verdant air.
Gerrard, what troubles you?
A head appeared at the edge of the platform. Though shadowed and sleepy, the boy's eyes seemed to glow silver in the night. Nothing, he said sullenly. His sleepy voice made him seem younger, almost a child. I'll go back to sleep. Karn stared, watching impassively until the face disappeared.
Good night, Gerrard.
The boy's voice came over the pallet's edge. Nothing you would care about. Karn gave a slow nod.
All right, then. Sleep well,
interrupted the boy. You don't even care that Vul stole my touchstone and some of the other stuff that was supposed to be mine. We were blood brothers, but he wasn't to touch those things unless I say so, and you don't even care about that. Something lay behind the boy's words, something Karn did not quite understand, something from that dark land of emotion where Karn was only a fearful sojourner.
Your stepfather has sent warriors to bring back those pieces of your legacy. I believe the warriors will succeed. I don't understand what you mean by saying I don't care.
Gerard's head reappeared, and he was still talking. They're part of you, after all. The pieces of my legacy, you think maybe you'd miss them just a little bit, since they're part of you, like my lungs and liver are part of me. But I don't hear any complaining from you about it, let alone anything like if you cared what was happening. The lung-liver comparison boggled Karn.
I do not respire air or metabolize lipids.
You didn't even notice when we were by the lake and the other boys were making fun of me and saying that my brother was often Albuito selling my legacy to buy an army. One of them even said his brother had signed up, said he got a new lizard skin vest and a knife. That was part of my legacy. What that boy got, my legacy, and parts of your body, was what he got. Like it wasn't lizard skin, but your own skin, or my own skin, since you don't even have skin. Doesn't that make you mad? It did. Anger set Karn's jaw on edge and made his joints stiff. Still, what use would such feelings serve?
Gerrard, you are 16 years old, on the verge of manhood, so this complaining ill beseems you. The warriors have gone to get your legacy back.
In fact, the boy said that his brother said that Vul said that you'd be too scared to do anything about it. Vul said you wouldn't even care, and even if you did care, you wouldn't do anything about it because you wouldn't want to scratch your polish, that you're no more dangerous than a silver spoon that I was born with. I'm starting to think maybe he was right. I mean, wasn't he right after all? Wasn't he right after all? The words grated like a saw blade through Karn. His insides began to boil and his vision narrowed to red tunnels. What good would such feelings of anger serve? None here, beneath a well-guarded arboreal village. But in Albuito, rage could do some real good. Gerrard sighed gustily. I should have known you wouldn't go. Serves me right for thinking you were more than a guardian, for thinking you were actually my friend. The last comment hurt worst of all. Karn lowered his gaze from the sleeping platform and peered out through the dense black night. His metallic head ratcheted slowly about until his direction sense homed in upon the exact position of Albuito. It was higher in the mountains, some 18 leagues distant, a shallow river, now dry until the desert rains came, a deep chasm, and the higher foothills lay between Karn and the town, which itself floated upon the surface of a shallow black mountain lake. But these obstacles were nothing. Karn's anger could sear away rivers and melt mountains. If he strode out steadily, he would reach the town a few hours before daylight. The red rage growing in him at last blossomed in the first step he took toward Albuito. A furtive shuffling sound announced Gerrard's surprise. You going? You doing something about my legacy?
I'm going,
Karn said simply. The boy's voice was excited now. Don't worry about me. I'm safe here. Father has 5 guards working tonight. Karn had, truth be told, quite forgotten his pledge to forever guard Gerrard, and that fact alone gave him a moment's hesitation. Never before had he abandoned his charge. Emotion was a strong thing indeed, if it could blind him so fully to his duty. Still, the pause was only momentary. Karn had already given himself over to fury, and it was intoxicating. Besides, there were 5 other guards. The boy would be fine when the Sylvan Golem saw him again. Karn's long strides carried him quickly from the village. The glowing windows retreated behind him in the trees until they seemed only distant fireflies. Beyond, the desert was darker, denser. Once the golem passed the boundaries of the oasis, the sounds of night animals faded. They could hear nothing but the moan of the desert wind and the faint hissing of the sands. None of this mattered to Karn. His eyes could see in utter darkness. His silver skin was proof against rocks and snake bites. He heard nothing but the loud buzz of anger in his head. He thought of Gerrard, fragile, besieged Gerrard, and the anger grew.
He treats me as a friend,
Karn muttered darkly to himself.
But what kind of friend am I?
Stoic, unimaginative, unimpassioned, slow, immense, and now uncaring. Perhaps this one night, this one decision would change all of that, would prove something at least to Gerrard and perhaps even to Karn as well.
I must earn his trust.
The forest fell away quickly to his relentless steps. The riverbed was cool and stony after the heat of the sands. It crunched beneath his feet. The chasm beyond took one mighty leap to cross. Then, slowly, patiently, he rose higher into the mountains, where Vul, his mercenary army, and pieces of Gerrard's legacy awaited. In time, ancient, rock-bound Lake Albuito appeared ahead, and its center, arrayed in a glowing circle, was the town itself. Held atop the water by means of magic and pontoon alike, the town was anchored to shore by day and to the center of the lake by night. Around the lake stretched a thin strip of greenery, leaves swaying gently in the wind. On one side of the city, numerous gangplanks of bamboo and reed were drawn up, and on the other, jutting docks were full of boats. Between the two were a collection of tall, improbable buildings jumbled together on the vast floating quay. Leaning on each other, connected by a series of wood bridges and rope walkways, The houses and shops of Valbuito were tall, ornamented with bay windows, turrets, arches, and towers, all in wood and bamboo, thatch and reed. That night, the town glowed with festival fires, its walkways crowded with revelers in warriors' armor. So, Vul was mustering an army. He had chosen a most defensible spot to do so. On that floating settlement, Vul could safely gather thousands of warriors before marching. The town was safe from invasion by any but aquatic creatures or armies with boats, or silver golems that did not breathe. Emerging from a break of cane, Karn waded down into the black water of the placid lake. Cool silt rose around him, caking his legs and grinding in his ankles and knees, but still, he continued. Soon, water poured into the deep silver collar around his neck and lapped at his jaw. He sensed, too, the empty inner cavities of his torso filling, the spaces that were supposed to hold the items of Gerrard's legacy. Though cool liquid coursed into his innards and water closed over his head, Karn's anger felt hotter than ever. The ropes of seaweed that dragged past him as he descended into the murk only stoked the flames of fury. Vul would pay, not only for the injustice of taking his stepbrother's possessions and using them to buy an army, but also for the indignity suffered in recovering that legacy. The bed of the lake dropped away in lightless steps to the bottom, perhaps 15 fathoms deep. The cold, muddy depths did not deter Karn. He could see past the blackness to the spot below where 5 gigantic anchors clutched the bottom. Tireless, Karn strode to the central one, grabbed a hold of the mast's chain that rose from it, and climbed. Above, the festival lights in the center of the town made a gold and fervid glow in the water. Though the undulating surface, Karn caught glimpses of drumming hands and leering faces, lizard-skin vests and feather-festooned spears. There were cups of ale there, too, and roasting haunches of pork. It was quite a feast that Vul threw for his men, the kind that precedes a great battle, and all of it brought by ransoming Gerrard's future. Hand over hand, Karn pulled himself up through the turgid flood. He reached the bright shining surface and hauled his streaming metal frame onto the wooden superstructure above. He found himself in the slanted hold where the anchor was kept when it was raised, and from that concealment he peered over the capstan to survey the center square of Valbuito. After the cold, muffled murk of the lake bed, the center of town was loud, hot, crowded, and bright. The settlement was the center of many caravan routes and was rich in commodities brought from far-off parts of Jamura. Soldiers milled about in laughing, arrogant clusters, their cups of ale so full they foamed down the planks at their feet. Torchlight glimmered from their dark faces and the iridescent scales of their lizard-skin coats. Here and there, jesters cavorted, entertaining the crowd by juggling torches and knives, singing songs and exchanging items from their own pockets with those of others. Long, low benches, fat logs split down the center and laid out upon the deck, held steaming platters of pork and grilled leeks. Wagons laden with the raw haunches of boar and bags of onions stood here and there about the square. At the far end of the open space, a more orderly group of warriors clustered around a broad table where a map lay spread. Above it stood a lean, young figure, bare to the waist, his powerful physique glistening like carved onyx in the torchlight. He was poised on an upturned barrel, a cane of bamboo in one hand with which he gestured imperiously at the map. Despite the distance between them, Karn immediately knew this to be Vul, rebel son of Sidar Kondo, and knew the map to be a schematic to his father's arboreal village. Karn turned his ears to the exact timbre of Vul's voice and heard the plans of war. There'll be 3 main bridges from the ground to the treetops. Once they're cut, the villagers will be trapped. Then we set fires here, here, and here. The largest will be beneath the warrior's lodge. We'll roast them in there like grubworms. Harsh laughter interrupted this comment. But I also plan a particularly fiery end for father here. There'll be plenty of plunder, of course. Larders and strong boxes, jewels, and our famed women. Bamboo dwellers have strong hands and long legs, you'll find. More laughter. While the rest of you are on finding sport elsewhere, I'll be conducting a boar hunt of my own, chasing down a squealing little piglet that has more pretense of calling himself my brother. He'll be stuck more than once before the hunt is done. Still streaming algid water and slimy muck, Karn rose from the anchor hold and strode wetly onto the deck. Into the midst of the revelers, his mere presence ended the laughing and drinking. Warriors fell back, dropping cups of ale and lifting swords and spears. Karn pushed past them with no interest or concern that he had shown in pushing past breaks of cane and bamboo. Those few with nerve enough to take a swing at the massive man of silver found their swords jangling in nerveless hands, their spear hafts crunched in the golem's grip. Ahead, Vul stopped his battle planning and raised an eye. A broad smile broke out upon his face, and he gestured widely with his arms. He shouted over the mothering soldiers, "Ah, if it's not my stepbrother's silver spoon come to join in the fun. We could use a silver golem if you'll fight. So you want to kill the bastard as much as I do, eh?" Karn's metallic face was incapable of scowling, but he suspected the fire in his belly shone bright in his eyes.
I am not here to join you. I am here to warn you. Anyone intent on harming Gerrard will have to deal with me first.
Catching the flippant spirit of their leader, the warriors around Vul let out a moan of feigned dread. Vul jumped from the barrelhead and, swaggering, approached the silver golem. "A terrible threat, indeed. These warriors have battled goblin armies and giant serpents, but an encounter with you? All that sermonizing and angst, every last fighter would be bored to death." The hilarity that followed this comment was exaggerated, perhaps as much from fear as from derision. But Karn could not discern such subtle differences, and his fury mounted. Gigantic hands moved with sudden, fierce speed. Karn grabbed Vul by the torso and hoisted him into the air. The ring of soldiers around the two widened. Those in front lifted weapons high. Vul gasped, true dread blossoming in his eyes, and his face reddened with the pressure of blood filling it. Karn hissed at him.
Your stepbrother is destined for greatness. He is the heir to the legacy. He is the one child born to defend this world. He is forged of flesh, as I was forged of silver, and each of us bear within the hope of generations.
Mastering his terror, the young rebel spat on the silver golem's face. "What good is my brother's legacy?" he cried. "Greatness cannot be handed to a man. You will denigrate it, despise it, nor can greatness be stolen from a man who truly possesses it. I'm the one destined for greatness, not that little piglet. I've taken Gerrard's precious legacy, what was never truly his, and with it, I've raised this army, and now I will take what belongs to my father, and soon what belongs to all the world." Karn growled.
I have come to take back the legacy.
"No," replied Vul, his vicious smile returning. "You've come to fall into the trap I've set for you. You've come because I wanted another piece of the legacy. You!" A wave of dread moved through Karn, but his hold on the rebel only grew stronger.
I will kill you if I must.
Vul shook his head, eyes creased in pain. "You wouldn't kill the Sidar's son? Couldn't bear to see the look in the Kondo's eyes."
I will kill you unless I get the legacy.
"I'm not afraid of death." With slow deliberation, Karn squeezed his hands together.
So be it.
Vul let out a blast of breath, lungs emptied by the massive pressure. Karn curiously felt the man's flesh slithering away beneath his touch. Humans were such fragile things, soft as soap bubbles. He gazed into the man's bulging eyes. Vul's face clenched in a knot of pain, and his mouth opened to shriek, but there was no air to bear the sound. In the sudden silence came the ominous pop of ribs. The warriors around rushed forward in mass, pummeling the silver giant with swords, clubs, spears, whatever came to hand. Karn's own frame rang with the assaults, mournful bell tones from the empty chambers where the legacy once resided, but none of the pummeling weapons left even the slightest scar on him.
Tell me where the rest of the pieces are, or die,
Karn said. He marveled at the cruel glee in his own voice. Vul resisted for one more moment before his hands waved frantically about him. Karn released the pressure, and the warriors fell back. Weak as a kitten, Vul hung in the silver golem's slacking grip. He panted brokenly as his sides trembled in pain.
Where are they?
Karn demanded. Head drooping in surrender, Vul gasped out. "Bring out the man!" The crowd of warriors parted, some moving purposefully toward a locked, bolted, and guarded doorway. The building was perhaps the most solid one in the town, constructed of vast timbers and reinforced with iron. A prison. As the guards worked at unlocking and opening the front double doors, a murmur of dissatisfaction and incredulity moved among the gathered warriors. "You won't be able to get them that easily, though," rasped Vul. "I hid them well." A manacled man emerged from the prison, flanked by 4 guards. The man was huge, a head taller and twice as wide as the rest of the crowd. His figure was enormous and muscled, his eyes proud as he shuffled forward in rags and chains, setting himself on the running board of the laden wagon. "The legacy is a valuable treasure, not something to be left lying about," Vul continued. "I was so impressed by your personal guardianship that,
I came up with another guardian. I found the biggest villager in Albuito, turned out to be the blacksmith, and cut him open. Stashed your treasures inside.
Only then did Karn notice the long, crude vertical slice of the blacksmith's distended belly. The skin had been stretched to accommodate the stolen pieces of the legacy, and then thick leather thongs had laced the man's muscles back together.
I don't know his real name,
Vool continued. The smile had returned to his wicked features.
Not interested in such trifles. To me, he's simply Karn, my vessel for the legacy, of course. Now that I've captured you, I don't need him anymore. One Karn will have to die.
Stunned, Karn dropped the grinning rebel to the planks and waded through the crowd toward the man with the butchered belly. Reaching the wagon beside which the blacksmith stood, Karn extended a silver hand and said in a voice choked with pity,
Come with me.
Vool staggered after.
Oh, he can't come with you. To make room for all that stuff, we had to pull out his own innards. He's kept alive only by the working of my archmage, to whom a number of the legacy artifacts are promised when I'm through with them. If you take my Karn away from me, he'll die.
Overcome, the silver golem dropped to his knees before the man and gazed into his eyes. Unblinking, the blacksmith returned this look, courage and sorrow written across his tormented features.
So you see,
came the harping voice of Vool,
the only way you and your precious Gerrard can have the legacy back is if you kill this man to get it. If you wouldn't kill me, the patricidal son of the Sidar, how would you ever kill an innocent man?
Shame, dread, and fury warred within Karn. He had been a fool. He had fallen into Vool's trap. His emotions had not been his own to command, but marionette strings pulled by Vool. He was nothing more than a silver spoon, as Vool had said, nothing but a pretty tool to be traded and used. Now, to all the other emotions Karn felt, there was also self-loathing, utter despair, and Vool was laughing. The rebel clutched his aching chest as he laughed, but he laughed all the same. The warriors around him added their guffaws, and merriment spread mockingly through the crowd. Soon the whole square broke forth in peals of laughter, the whole square except the two figures at its center. Karn and his namesake regarded each other. Holding his sewn-up belly, the blacksmith spoke, softly and evenly.
I'm dead one way or another. Cannot blame you if you reach within me and draw forth what is yours. Vool has killed me, not you.
Over the roaring crowd, Vool shouted,
Behold, the helpless guardian! Behold, the silver golem with a heart of glass and a gun of paper! Fear him! Tremble before him!
The blacksmith was still speaking.
One way or another, you must act, Karn. Listen to your fear and flee, or listen to your fury and take what is yours. Return to Gerrard and guard him from Vool. Strike me down, and with the treasures once again in your grasp, strike down Vool once and for all.
Creatures like this one, hulking, powerful creatures that are too fearful of their own might to use it, are the creatures that will roll over before us and grant us the world. You must act, Karn. You must act.
Karn crumpled slightly forward. Vool was right. He couldn't kill this man. He couldn't kill even these hyenas. In rage, Karn reared his head back, howled, and flung out a massive arm. His fist struck the food-laden wagon. It lurched up into the air. Raw haunches of pork tumbled up. Onions pelted down. Wheels turned in languid suspicion above the ground. Soldiers scattered, and with a great crunching boom, the wagon smashed under the quay. Its profound impact was followed by shocked silence from the warriors.
Behold, crowed Vool viciously. The guardian has slain someone at last.
Karn looked. There, jutting from beneath the wagon's ruined bulk, were the lifeless legs of a small village boy.
Enough!
Shrieked the blacksmith. He reached with maniacal hands, dug fingers into his own flesh, and ripped wide open the wound.
Here's your legacy!
Out tumbled the glistening items. Dumbfounded, Karn caught them one by one in his imploring hands. Even as the blacksmith crumpled, dead beside him, Karn saw that he held not just the items of the legacy, but also a great, wet gem, the touchstone, one of the few magical devices with the power to shut him down, and this one worked on contact. The rage was suddenly gone, even the fear, even the despair. Karn was shutting down. Desire was draining away. Sensation followed quickly after. Vool's mocking laughter dissolved into silence. Karn was defeated. He was deactivating. In one final exertion of will, Karn clutched the grisly touchstone tighter, irretrievable, within his silver grip. Warriors rushed him as they saw what he did, their hands clawing at his implacable fist, but they were too late. Already he was as still and dead as stone. The rest of that night, the rest of the next decade, he experienced in fleeting, fragmentary impressions. The world moves all too quickly when one is a statue. Karn felt Vool prying futilely at his hands of silver. Karn saw warriors standing in dejection and defeat. Karn glimpsed fires, torches borne by villagers, and oars and gaff hooks, shouts and splashing waters. Vool and his mercenaries were driven off the docks into the lake. The slain figure of the blacksmith was borne away. Daylight came, and darkness after that, and daylight again. The smith was brought back, this time within a great sepulchre, and shrine was made in his honor at the foot of the silver golem statue. They were inseparable then, the metal Karn and the fleshly Karn, each in his time a bearer of the legacy, each emptied now of what had once made them great. It was in gazing at that sarcophagus that Karn made his pacifistic vow, never again to fight or slay. Perhaps it was only the conviction of a moment, but as the sun circled above, the thought became cemented into an eternal vow. And Karn stood. It was his final refuge. At first, the townsfolk remembered him as the strange silver man who had come to rally the people of El Buido and drive out the army of Vool. Later, they remembered him to be the mere statue of that man. Last of all, he became only a public perch for cowbirds and swallows. To be deactivated so long grieved Karn, of course. He agonized over the fate of Gerrard. Vool's attack on his father's village must have been somewhat successful. Neither Gerrard nor Kondo nor any of the warriors had come seeking Karn. Perhaps they were all dead. But Vool's success could not have been complete either, since he himself had never returned. All Karn was left with then was worry and daze. It became the pattern for his life, a tempest of emotion wrapped in a cold, still shell. At least, deactivated, he could not kill again. Tarnish and bird droppings and various substances conveyed upon the questing fingers of children conspired to make Karn almost unrecognizable by the time he was at last discovered. Even then, it was not Gerrard or Kondo or even Vool that strolled into the public square and, arms clasped, surveyed the immobile silver golem. It was Sisay, captain of the Weatherlight, ship that was one more piece of Gerrard's lost legacy. She bought the shabby old statue, hauled it onto the cargo hold. Still, she could not awaken the slumbering giant who held the touchstone in his grasp. So, Karn had been rescued from a sunlit public square, only to stand immobile within a dark wooden hold. There he remained, outwardly as still as a statue, but inwardly ravaged by sorrow, guilt, anger, dread, and rage. At long last, into the storm of emotion came a new impulse. Joy. It came at the touch of a crew member, a man in a white shirt, brown waistcoat, and black pants. The man had dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Something like mirth danced in his sharp eyes and scrubbed the grime away from the goblin. "Hello, Karn. Remember me?" he asked, blowing a stream of dust from the silver collar. "The kid that got you into all of this." The man placed a hand on the touchstone. It shimmered, huge into the lantern light of the hold. Gerrard, trained in magic by the Morrow sorcerer Multani, put forward what power he possessed, focusing on the touchstone, knowing the trick of the thing, positioning it to reactivate the golem. Metal shuddered as life surged back in. Joints creaked and limbs moved, trailing great curtains of grit. "Wake up! Come to get you out."
Gerrard,
Karn said. His voice sounded metallic and hollow after so many years of silence, but there was a world of feeling in that one word.
I'm supposed to rescue you.
"Yes, my friend. Sometimes flesh is stronger than metal."
Wake up! I've come to get you out.
It was not Gerrard who spoke this time, but a Phyrexian guard, a creature whose flesh was stretched and hypertrophic beneath webworks of steel and bone. Karn shifted, his gaze swinging toward the hideous figure in the open doorway of his cell. The woman's bald skull terminated in a jag-tipped sagittal crest, and the base of her chin sported a bare, jutting bone. Karn had seen this guard before, had seen her chin horn strike dagger-like into Tongarth as she escorted him to his cell. The edge of the mutated bone was still stained with the Minotaur's blood.
Where are we going?
Karn asked dully. The woman's lips drew back from her filed teeth, and an expression that could not be called a smile stretched her neck muscles like steel cables.
It's torture time.
After his long stillness, Karn's body felt profoundly heavy. With an effort of will, he took a step back and turned around.
I must request mercy for my comrade, the Minotaur.
Karn began, his metallic voice tremulous.
He's captive only because of my...
Too late,
the guard said curtly. She gestured toward the corridor outside, where 3 more Phyrexians and a passel of shoving, chattering mog goblins clustered.
We've already moved him. If you'd like to see him, to give him a word of encouragement,
I would very much appreciate that.
I'll take you past his torture cell, on the way to yours.
Karn moved out among the clutching goblins and wondered what other torments awaited. Watching his friend's suffering and death would be the worst torture Karn could think of, but Phyrexians were artists of pain, and their violent imaginations were boundless. The group escorted Karn into a dank and tortuous tangle of passageways as rank as the bowels of a leviathan. Karn reflected that this was, in fact, a kind of digestive system for the Empire. Each cell along the twisted hall contained a creature that had been swallowed by the vast war machine, and thereafter subjected to knives, teeth, acids, and fire, and slowly dissolved away. Components of his flesh and fragments of his mind and rags of his pain bore outward to nourish the ravenous beast. The same end would come to Tahngarth, too. His body and soul would go to power the mustering monster of Phyrexia. His flesh would be food to them, his agony would be their wine. The procession of goblins and Phyrexian guards came to a halt, and Karn drew himself from his reverie. The guard with the sagittal crest gestured to a stout round door of flowstone, bolted tight to a curving walls. Crimson and hot, the door seemed a valve leading into another organ of the Leviathan. The guard set her hand on a slide in the door and drew it back, careful to keep her eyes away from the coruscating orange light that stabbed out from the space. With the light came the roars of agony and rage.
Tahngarth,
muttered Karn, a frisson of dread moving through him. The guard grabbed Karn's hand and drew him toward the slot.
You had something to tell your friend?
Karn leaned inward, the light that glowed across his eyes seared like flame. The chamber within seemed a smooth-walled, high-ceilinged oven. It was bathed in a fiery glow that originated from a single dancing beam of light that stabbed down from the ceiling. Wherever the ray passed, it blistered the flowstone floors and walls. Tahngarth fled that stabbing light. He leapt up a sloping wall to escape its stabbing ray. The beam swept just beneath his hooves, melting and scarring the flowstone. Tahngarth slid back to the floor, gathered his feet beneath him, and dived from the returning shaft. It struck him even so in a diagonal line from hip to shoulder. The flesh caught in the wake of the beam mounded and roiled. Tawny fur turned white. Tahngarth released a roar of anguish and scrambled away from the beam. He fetched up against the opposite wall and panted raggedly, his eyes glowing as he watched the beam sweep once again toward him. Launching himself along one side of the chamber, he struggled to skate past the ray, but it veered and lashed across his face. His horns, once thin and straight, began to thicken and twist. Reddish-brown eyes suddenly glowed yellow like a pair of candle flames. Blinded, Tahngarth clutched his face and crumpled, his body bucking involuntarily. Another furious shriek erupted from him. Karn was shrieking too. He realized it only when the guards, all 3, shoved him back from the doorway. He had felt each stabbing pass of that mutagenic ray as though it had struck his own body. He had twitched and swayed with each dodge and jump the Minotaur took. He had screamed with every scream of Tahngarth. Guilt, rage, shame, hatred, fury. Karn's arms trembled, aching to crush the goblins around him as if they were grapes, to paint the walls with the blood of the Phyrexian guard, to smash down that door and free Tahngarth. Yes, he would do it. The storm of desperation mounted within him. Yes, he would kill them. Then he and Tahngarth would flee through the citadel, side by side, metal and machine, slaying whatever got in their way. They would leave a trail of bodies and blood. They would die, yes, but die fighting. Karn's silver hands drew into fists, and he swooned, hungry from blood.
I cannot blame you if you reach within me and draw forth what is yours.
The storm of hatred did not abate. Karn pressed down upon it, stealing it away once again. He staggered, almost overcome, and turned to face the guard.
What's happening? What are you doing to him?
Karn implored.
Improving him.
The guard replied vindictively.
He'll have to be considerably stronger, a bit more bloodthirsty, and a damn sight more submissive, before he can be Grevenilvak's second.
Second? Tongarth's misery was only beginning. Not be merely turned into a hideous monster, but then also be suspended on strings, a puppet in service of evil. It was Tongarth's greatest fear, realized. Greven was doing to Tongarth what Volrath had done to him.
Your master's hatred must be great to do such a thing.
Karn hissed.
I'll pass along the compliment.
The guard sneered.
Let's go.
As Karn pivoted to follow, a thunderous pounding came at the door. Tongarth's yellow eyes glowed feverishly on the other side, and wisps of acrid white smoke drifted up from his battered head.
Kill him, Karn! Kill him and open his door!
Gazing piteously back at his friend, Karn dropped his head in sorrow.
Kill them! You must act, Karn! You must do something!
The shout dissolved into a shriek, and Tongarth crumpled down, out of sight.
Sorry, my friend.
Karn whispered.
Anger is fleeting. Remorse is eternal.
One of the Phyrexian guards slid the slot closed. The band moved their prisoner forward. Karn shuffled along, devastated, his hide ringing hollowly with each step. He could not imagine greater torment than what he felt now. His vow of pacifism had not only brought about Tongarth's capture, but had also made impossible his rescue. The Minotaur would die, or he would be so altered he wished he were dead. What greater torment could await?
Here is your cell,
said the woman. She gestured toward an open doorway that led into a bare cube. There were no furnishings, no windows, no port in the ceiling for a mutagenic ray, only 4 red glowing walls, a floor, and a ceiling.
Get in.
Karn gazed for one long moment at the blank space, his solitary hint of defiance, then moved quietly inward. His silver shoulders scraped the doorframe as he pushed past. Mog goblins clustered about his feet, intent on hurting him within. The walls gave back the echo of Karn's ponderous tread as he marched to the center of the cell and stopped.
Get in there,
shouted one of the guards. 3 more Mogs came skidding in among the others. Then the door slammed and locked behind them, closing nearly 20 of the despicable beasts in with Karn. The slot in the door whispered open, and Karn pivoted to see who looked in.
You should still be able to hear your friend's screams here,
the woman said. A moment's pause confirmed the prediction. Karn hunched down, miserable.
You torture him with action, and me with inaction. How fitting. You blaze away his body, and kill both of us in doing it. And you lock me away with these.
He gestured to the goblins climbing up his legs, gnawing on his fingers, fighting to scramble onto his shoulders.
Reminders of the last creature I killed. You twist Tongarth's body. You twist my soul.
The guard seemed to shrug.
You could have stopped it. You could have killed us and stopped it. You could have killed these Mogs even now.
I want to. Believe me, I do. Then you would surely have won.
Karn said, patiently plucking away a goblin that had been playing his head like a drum. As Karn stared at the wriggling, cursing creature, the tempest of guilt and fury welled up in him again.
This way I may be tortured, but I will not be damned. As long as I stand here and endure, I am still not yours.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'm very good at standing and waiting. I have stood and waited while the years crawled all over me. I can stand and wait again. With these pests, too. I will not be goaded into violence. You cannot make me kill again.
We'll see about that.
That was when the floor tilted, suddenly, violently. Karn was thrown off his feet amid a spinning cluster of goblins. They all simultaneously struck to the tipped surface and slid quickly down to smash against one of the flowstone walls. Even as Karn's body rang with the impact, goblin blood sprayed out from beneath him. The floor rose back to level, and Karn staggered up. Behind him, he left 3 broken bodies, crushed with the prints of his silver frame.
Damn you!
Karn growled as he stood, his feet slick with gore. It was as though the Phyrexians had read his mind. They had stolen away his last refuge against the chaos around and within him. Now he couldn't even stand. They had taken away his one salvation. Now his very existence meant killing.
Damn you!
We'll bring you more mogs when you've gone through these. They breed like roaches. You'll probably go through 100 or so in a day.
There's a vicious tightening of her eyes, that same non-smile, just before the slot slammed closed, and the floor toppled again. Here ends the tale of Karn. A dark room. God, that's horrible! Ilcaster stared at the librarian, appalled, his mouth open. What a fiendish torture! How long did it go on?
Long enough,
Replied the old man grimly.
long enough to almost drive both Tungarth and the Golem mad. It was the clever cruelty of Volrath to find that element in both prisoners that would be his greatest torture to them. For Karn, it was the denial of his pacifism. For Tungarth, it was the destruction of his looks.
He leaned forward and patted the boy's shoulders.
Never mind, lad. In time, I promise you they were both rescued by Gerrard and his friends.
And did they find her as well? Asked Ilcaster.
Who?
Sisay, of course. After all, that's the person they came to Rath to find.
Ah, yes. Well, but as you've already seen, lad, the search was not simple. But yes, eventually they found her.
Oh, good. I was worried she'd be dead by the time they got her. Or worse.
No. Sisay was alive, but Gerrard was forced to wonder if finding her hadn't somehow been part of Volrath's plan. After they left the map room, Gerrard, Stark, Miri, and Krovax continued on their way. Climbing even higher into the stronghold, they found it increasingly necessary to cross bridges and walkways formed of flowstone. At last they came to a tower that Stark identified for them as the Prisoner Tower. There were no guards about it. It could only be reached by a long, narrow flowstone bridge without rail. Below was only blackness. Gerrard knew that somewhere down there, Weatherlight waited for him. Gerrard, ordering the others to stay behind a moment, set one cautious foot after another on the bridge. As he did so, ropes and tentacles of stone formed and flowed toward him, seeking to ensnare the intrepid adventurer. Hastily, Gerrard beat a retreat. Thought for a while, his companions stood silent, near to their goal, yet separated by an apparently unbridgeable gulf. Then, chuckling to himself, Gerrard disappeared back into the tower as the others stood wondering. He reappeared in a few minutes, bearing with him the body of the shape-shifting creature killed by Krovax. When he hurled it onto the bridge, the ropes and tentacles rushed at it, and as they were busy crushing it, pulling it to pieces, Gerrard and his friends quickly crossed to the tower. Within, they quickly, and with little trouble, found the cell containing Karn.
Good! Interrupted Ilcaster. So they stopped the torture?
Yes, of course. Was Mogg still alive within the cell, fled shrieking into the darkness, while Gerrard comforted his old friend. Farther down the same corridor, Gerrard found and freed Tungarth, and though the Minotaur was ashamed of his newly bulked and twisted body, he joined them in their search for Sisay, the final object of their quest. At length, they came to a laboratory, clean, cold, and indifferent to their presence. There, at last, they saw the body of their long-sought captain, imprisoned within a strange glass cylinder. With some difficulty, they freed her from the glass jail. She stared at them, seemingly unaware of their presence, and Miri, who was holding one of her arms, hissed in alarm.
What was it? Cried the boy. Was Volrath coming? The master shook his head.
No, something much worse. Before their horrified eyes, the body of Sisay swayed and changed into an armored guard.
Ilcaster brought his hands down on the small table, raising a cloud of brown dust from its surface that floated in the yellow candlelight. Then it wasn't Sisay at all!
No, agreed the librarian. Just one of Volrath's many tricks. The guard fled the laboratory and the companions were left alone again. Now bewildered, they agreed to Stark's suggestion to search for the Dream Halls. But since the way led back across the Flowstone Bridge they'd crossed earlier, Gerrard suggested they should seek a different path. So they did.